anything.
All right. So it's 6:03 and we're gathered here to have a renter tenant forum. I'm Gabe Paulson, and on the rent stabilization ad hoc, and Councilman Kevin Haroff is here with me, and we have our city manager, Dan Schwartz, as well as Allison, the city clerk, who's helping us with moderation and technical issues. And I thought, just as intro, I would hand it over to our city manager just to give us a few housekeeping guidelines. So, Dan.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Paulson. So welcome, everybody. This is meant to be an open forum this evening. It's an opportunity for Councilmember Haroff and Vice Mayor Paulson to hear from individuals, maybe have more of a conversation. So to facilitate that, we're going to be inviting individuals when we call on them to be panelists, and you'll have the option, if you choose, to turn on your camera for the engagement with the ad hoc committee. We asked that people submit their names in advance because we wanted to prioritize participation for Larkspur tenants versus folks who may be interested in the topic of rent stabilization but aren't Larkspur residents. Depending on how the evening goes and what sort of time constraints we're under, we may be able to open it up to folks who weren't able to pre-register. But Alice, our clerk, will be calling on people based on the submission that they made online in advance. We know some of you like to use screen names rather than your regular name, your name that you submitted to us. So if Allison doesn't see somebody's name on the attendee list in order to promote them, when she calls your name, please raise your hand so we'll figure out where you are and promote you over to be a panelist. I know that the ad hoc committee may have some questions that they want to ask individuals when they speak. And so as we go through this, you can engage them as you feel comfortable. A couple of brief announcements too. I know a lot of folks are interested in how this process is going to continue from here. First of all, there will be an agenda item on next week's council meeting that'll be more than the report out from the ad hoc committee. It will actually provide the foundation for the council to begin a more substantive discussion on this topic. Secondly, we had thought we would hold a similar forum next week for property owners and landlords. We're going to postpone that a little bit longer to sort of let some of our other processes catch up. The ad hoc committee is still arranging a few stakeholder meetings that they want to hold, and we want to make sure those take place as well. With that, Mr. Vice Mayor, I turn it back to you. And if after you and Councilmember Haroff, if you have any opening comments or thoughts, we'll turn over to Allison to call on our first participant.
Great. Thank you, Dan. So I just wanted to thank everybody for attending. I have a feeling many of you will have been part of our meetings already. And just by way of trying to get as much out of this meeting as possible, we're hoping that you can tell us a little bit about yourself. That is fine, an introduction brief, but we're also trying to get a sense for some of the more specific policy details. So as you know, we're a small city. We have a limited budget and a small staff, and we're not sure what we'll be able to implement here. So we're really looking for kind of what the minimum type of what you envision as the minimum help from the city that may actually benefit you or other tenants. So we'll get a little more specific about that. But anyway, we'll just open it up to public comment in a minute here, and Allison can go through the queue. And I thought I'd just hand it over to Councilmember Haroff if you had any other thoughts or suggestions for getting this going, and what questions you may want to have of people coming up.
Sure. Thanks, Gabe, for that introduction. And welcome to everybody who's participating. The renter community here in Larkspur and the interest in this issue from that source was as I think most know, kind of instrumental in my education on this subject recently. And I'm looking forward to a robust discussion with all interested parties as we go through it. So it's been very helpful. Just maybe one clarification to a point that Gabe stated. In characterizing the approach we're kind of looking for, I might characterize it a little bit differently. It's not so much that we're looking for a minimalist approach. I think we're looking for something that is sensible, understandable, and includes aspects of an administrative process that the city can manage successfully. As Gabe pointed out, we are a small city. We are not Berkeley. We are not Sayreville. We are a smaller city, and our resources have to be managed accordingly. That doesn't mean we can't have a robust program. And I think that's what we're looking to accomplish here. One that is robust, one that is fair, and that one that really addresses the changing economic circumstances of people who live in our community, in particular, the renters in our community. It's not an easy time, and we appreciate that. And I think we're looking for your input to help us formulate policies around the issues I just described. And again, really appreciate your involvement tonight and look forward to our ongoing dialogue.
Great, thanks, Kevin. So with that, Allison, if you can, start the public comment or the questions, or again, we'll.
So we're going to invite Vice Mayor Paulson. We're going to invite folks up to actually be a panelist, and you'll be able to engage them based on the submission they made online and request to speak. So,
okay.
Looks like Allison's already calling on the first person.
Sorry about that. I may have jumped the gun. I'm going to go through our speaker card submittals in order, and I'll bring people over one by one and just let the next two people in line know to be ready. And if you could raise your hand for the next commenters. So first we'll hear from Allison Andrews. After that will be Robin Jordan and Kate Uranthy.
Great. Thank you, Allison.
Hi.
Welcome,
Hi.
Allison.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to voice my opinion in this matter. And it's serious, very serious. Larkspur's my hometown. Grew up here. My parents bought a house here in 1964. And I've lived other places and I've always come back. Larkspur's my hometown. I love it here. I've been a renter. I've lived in my current apartment for over 10 years. It's owned by a family, so I'm very fortunate in that. My concern is when outside money comes in and buys these properties up cheap for investments, for stockholders, for profit. I'm not begrudging landlords making some profit, and in fact, they've made an investment. But when you've lived somewhere for, tens of years, decades, and the increases get larger and larger every year. Our income doesn't increase that much every year. And I just think that there should be some kind of limit on how much rent increase can happen in a year. And also keep an eye on outside investment that are coming up and changing Marin County and Larkspur in particular. It is a small town. And that's what makes it so charming. And that's why people want to be here. And some of us are, natives here that have, well, not real natives, but have lived here our whole lives. I've moved away, but I've come back. And this is my home and I want to continue. And getting older, I worry about retirement and whether I'm going to be able to afford to live here for the rest of my life. And it doesn't look, and things keep going this way, I'm gonna have to leave. And it's just another small part of Larkspur going away. Anyway, thank you. I could go on and on, but I'll let somebody else speak. So thank you very much.
Great, Allison. Thank you so much
Thank
for your
you.
comment.
And I'm looking for Robin Jordan. If you could raise your hand, I'm not seeing you on the list, but if you're under a different name. And waiting for that person to raise their hand, I'll move on to the next person, Kate Aranthi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Kate.
Hello? Oh, wait a minute. I can't hear you. I prefer to stay as attendee just because, if you can hear me, like, is that working?
We can
Yeah,
hear you.
we hear you
Why
fine.
can't I hear them? Is the recording on? Okay, is that now working?
We hear you.
We can, yeah, we can hear
Okay,
you.
I'll just talk. I can't really hear you. I'm sorry. I'm not sure what's going on. I'm having a little afternoon foosball. I think we need an ordinance that includes a cap on the rent increases and also gives us just cause protection. I'm a senior with health issues, and while I'm still able to work, it isn't as much as I used to, and it certainly isn't keeping up with inflation or the increase that I got this year, which was 8.8%. It was almost $400 a month. I'm dipping into my retirement to pay for that, which is really stressful. I want to stay where I am. My medical providers are nearby, my friends, my business and everything. So that's why I'm hoping that the city council can find a way to implement a cap on the rent increases and also prevent, continue to have just cause evictions. Thank you.
Great. Kate, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I don't think she heard me.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Kate, can you, I can hear you. Yeah, are you a resident of Skylark, or can you say, I don't know if you're comfortable saying,
Actually,
what
yes,
part
I
of the
am.
city you live in?
No, I am a Skylark tenant. And when I moved in
Okay.
here, we weren't getting the kind of increases that we just had. And that was pretty much of a shock that when it got sold. And there haven't been, I actually should try and find out. I haven't been able to get any information on any so-called assistance with the rent from the new company.
Okay. And would you be open to meeting with the new company?
I'm actually been trying to for months. I put a request into the Marin County District Attorney for mediation. And we almost had one scheduled. They weren't available. It's been going on, I think, since May. After they raised the rent, I put it in thinking I would hope to negotiate the rent, which they wouldn't do personally, but that if not, maybe they would negotiate some things here, like getting better air conditioning and insulation and those sorts of things. And I'm still trying to get that done. Hello?
Yes, yeah.
Kate, we can hear you. Gabe, can I ask a
Okay.
question also of Kate?
Sure.
Can you hear me all right, Kate?
Yes, I can. I just
Good.
guess I don't have a speaker. I have it up to my ear. I can hear it.
Oh, okay, good. Well, we'll manage. One of the things that you emphasized in your comments was the issue of a cap.
Yes.
And one of the things that we are in fact wrestling with is not whether we should have it so much, but what it would be. The state law does impose an annual cap on rent increases, which, as we've heard from lots of people, is challenging to meet. It's 10% and it could be done every year. So we're looking at something that, or we're trying to find something that accommodates the interests of the community of renters here in Larkspur is also fair to landlords. I understand your point about outside investors coming in and that issue. That's actually one of the reasons that I got more engaged on the subject.
Mhm.
But I'd be curious to hear from you and from others in the group tonight. If we are going to move in our own ordinance to a cap that is different from what the state does, what would your suggestions be?
I would think 2 to 3% is fair. That gives some return on investment to the landlords and increase per year. And it's not so much that, hopefully we could sustain it. I mean, of course, I'd love to have no increases, but I don't think that's reasonable either.
Okay, well, that's a question I'd like to have others in the group tonight, reflect on and provide some suggestions about, because that is something we want to hear from people on. So thank you for those comments.
Sure. Any other questions?
No, thank you. Thank you for your information and your time.
Thank you. Bye.
Our next commenter will be Kevin Carroll. After that, followed by Chris Miloslavich. If Chris is in the audience, if he could raise his hand, or she to be next.
All right, welcome, Kevin. Kevin, I think you're on mute.
Kevin, you're on mute.
Okay, I had to go through a couple of things there. Just a couple of comments about the numbers you've been asking about. The thing that strikes me is, according to the 2020 census, there's about 5,800 households in Larkspur, and a little over 3,000 of them are renters. And I know you're trying to balance it with the people who are the owners of those rental properties, which amount, as far as we know so far, 65. And I think that number speaks volumes. I know you're trying to be very careful about not causing major financial disruption to the landlords, but we're looking at the financial disruption to over 3,000 people as opposed to 65. So if you are going to make an error, I would suggest it be better on the side of renters as opposed to landlords, and also the realization that most renters are living paycheck to paycheck, literally less than a month to 2 months of reserves, whereas landlords have the property and the value of that property that they can refinance, and if there is a major imbalance, they can come to you and you can rectify the situation within a month or two by altering whatever you do pass. I think it's very instructional, if you might, to listen to the last week's video of the Fairfax City Council. They had a very elaborate proposal for both renter protection and a separate one for rent stabilization, and they're paring it down dramatically to the size of their city. And I think it'll be interesting to look at whatever they come out with. Another issue guys keep coming up with is about the cost and the burden on the size of to the city. The bottom line is this could easily pay for itself. With over 3,000 renters paying $10 per month, that would provide the city with about $360,000 a year. And no matter how you structure it, it's the renters who are going to be paying for this. And I personally have no problem with that. $10 a month would be well worth the investment for reasonable protections. So I hope you'll keep those things in consideration. Thank you.
Kevin, just a couple of quick questions. So on the 3,000 number, I'm wondering if you're looking at how that breaks down by the amount and burden. I'm using the same data probably you are, census and community survey and housing elements, and it seems to me that there's a substantial number which is at the medium income end, which is 109,000. So you think it's 3,000 or maybe half that or a third, or what number do you think is actually universal assistance?
I have, for the city of Larkspur, I have no idea, though I do know that the Marin Housing Authority does keep very good track of these numbers, and they'd be the ones to consult on it. If you'll recall the charts that I submitted to you several years ago about incomes and the cost of living increases, and the rest of it was material provided to us by the Marin Housing Authority. They have experts in this field, and I'm sure they'd be delighted to talk and work with you guys on coming up. And they're a very objective group. They're neither pro landlord or pro tenant. They're there to serve the county as a whole. And they made that very clear. I was very impressed with their professionalism. So I'd really recommend sitting down with them.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I actually have, I think you're right. They have a lot of data on unincorporated, and they do have some great stuff. And, hopefully we'll share more at the next meeting. Kevin, since you and I, we've worked together on other issues, I'm curious, this might be a little bit of a side topic, but if you can say anything about Section 8 housing, I think you've brought it up in public comment, and I'm wondering how you see this fitting into the equation.
I think it's really nothing. I think you've got to find out the numbers of how many people are currently on it. I know it took us, and this was 10 years ago when my son, he actually applied 15 years ago, and it took 5 years for him to get to a place on the list where he was finally granted one. And he had going for him, so to speak, under the point systems that they use in assigning this, the fact that he was both physically and mentally challenged. For someone who's just economically challenged, you're farther down on the list, quite frankly. And so you can't really, there's still, the last time I checked, there's still a long waiting list to get those Section 8 vouchers. They have created special ones for people who are homeless. And I believe they've tried to convert some of those for people who are about to become homeless. But for someone who isn't in immediate danger, it can be a long wait to get that help.
Okay, great. So thank you so much, Kevin. And as always, I really appreciate your public comment. You provide a lot of it, and it's always informative. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and if Robin Jordan or Chris Miloslavich are in the audience and wish to have their public comment time, they can raise their hand, please. In the meantime, we'll move to Julianne Newstatter.
Hey, Julie,
Julie, you're muted. That's better.
Now?
yeah, we hear you. Thank you.
Okay, my camera's doing something weird, so I'm gonna just have my picture up here.
No problem.
Yeah, I have lived in Marin for about 8 years. I grew up in the Bay Area. You guys have heard me talk before. I have family here. I have a business here. As a single person, I keep almost, trying to save money to possibly buy a house, and it just, as prices go up and up and up, it's not possible. So I've been renting, and as I've been renting and rents go up and up and up, any money that I could save for possibly buying a house is going down, 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 down. In fact, I'm having to spend a lot of that on my rent, and at some point soon it will be all gone. I work hard, and I feel that we need some sort of rent stabilization for people who have good jobs, who are educated, who work, their jobs and do the work and are part of the community, to be able to stay in Marin. People who may not qualify for some of the subsidies and things, but still can't afford to pay their rent. And a lot of us are, have really good jobs and are very well educated and still can barely afford to live here. Rents are quite astronomical. My rent will be going up $243 a month on the 1st of October. Following year, if it can go up 10% again, it'll be another $270 a month, and that'll be almost $3,000 in 2 years of raises. My wages are not going up like that, and nobody else's are. And these corporate companies that are coming in and buying up all of the land here, they're taking away a lot of the amenities and things that we had before and charging us a great deal more. So I really feel that we need some sort of rent stabilization, and that just cause evictions are necessary as well, because if we just have rent control with a cap, and no just cause evictions, then the landlords are going to find whatever way they can to get rid of anybody who is not at least at market rate or above. So they go hand in hand. They must happen together, or else people are going to be continuing to still flee Marin because they cannot stay here anymore. And basically Marin will be left with the elite of the elite and nobody else in the community. Anyway, I've spoken before. Those are kind of my 2 cents right now. I can go on and on about things like, yes, I am up at Skylark, things like they bought us new pool furniture. They need to raise our rents, but they bought us new pool furniture. And I looked at the van and saw where it came from. And if they bought it at full price and before taxes, it would have been $169,000 worth of unnecessary furniture. They really are giving us less services, no communication. I asked them about taking out some of the popcorn ceilings if they were, doing it in a way that was permitted, tested, and had asbestos abatement. I got the runaround. I got the door slammed in my face. These are just a few of the things. Some of my neighbors have rodents. They won't take care of it. Dead animals underneath the buildings. They ignore those phone calls. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that these landlords are doing, saying that they're giving us more where they're giving us less and charging us a lot more. So anyway, we need something in terms of rent stabilization. I believe what we originally asked for was 60% of CPI or 5% or whatever is less. And there are a lot of other places in California that are going much lower than that, 3%, capping at 3%, and like 40% of CPI. I don't have the list, but we can get that to you if you would like. I'm going to stop there.
Okay.
If you have any questions? I'm
Yeah,
happy to.
thank you. Yeah, no, thank you. Appreciate your comments. And yeah, I don't know, Kevin, if you had anything else to ask or add.
Actually, I do, because this raised a consideration that I've been also wrestling with. So we are talking about a cap. I mean, I think everybody's kind of interested in seeing what we might be able to come up with on that subject. But the other concern that I have that's related to it is that a cap that will stay the same from year to year? One of the concerns that I think we've heard from this community whether you like the 10% state cap or not, it's one that they can, that landlords can impose every year, which I think is probably looked at with good reason as onerous to many people on this call. So my question for you, and maybe for the larger group as well, is yes, we do a cap, but do we do anything else to address the issue of rental increases at whatever cap we approve on a year-to-year basis? Is that something you'd be interested in us considering, or would you just be
Yes,
happy with setting a cap and letting it go from year to year?
I'm actually not totally sure what you're asking. Are you saying that on top of having a cap that they could the cap would last a certain amount of years or something like that? I'm not
Well,
sure what you're asking.
yeah, I'm sorry. The state cap is 10%, right?
Mhm.
And landlords can adjust their rents on an annual basis up to 10% every year. And what I at least have been hearing is that one of the concerns that folks have is that regardless of whether you think that 10% is a good cap or not, one of the things that's really challenging to the renter community in Larkspur is that they can do it year after year. So they could do it 10% this year, and then they could do it another 10% next year, and they could do it another 10% the year after that, on and on and on. And then all of a sudden, over a period of time, the rents have really increased dramatically. So I guess what I'm looking for is maybe a little bit of feedback to how we might address that year after year issue.
I think if the cap is low enough, then it could address it. I mean, this is the first time I've thought about that, so I'd have to think a little bit harder about what
Sure.
would be reasonable. But I know, I did live in San Francisco for a while. They have great rent control. I've lived in places for 10 years. Landlords haven't even raised the rent. And I've lived in other places where it's a couple percent a year. I've also been a landlord. I know that there are expenses that need to be covered, and that it's not always, it's not just gravy that you're getting when you own a property, but a small increase every year to keep up with, the things that need to be fixed that are going to improve the value of the property, keep the health of the property, but also improve, the lives of the tenants. I mean, those are things that are just, that have to happen. But if the cap was small enough, it might keep up with, raises that people are getting in their jobs. I mean, things are particularly tough right now, pandemic, with what's happening, in the stock market, with there may be more unemployment coming up. I can't really answer that question. The world is insane right now. But I do know that most people that I know are living paycheck to paycheck. And, it's not that they're sitting at home twiddling their thumbs. They're working hard. I don't know if
Okay,
that answered your question.
You know what, yes, and your answer was absolutely appropriate. This is kind of an issue I'm just kind of struggling with, because the concern that I have is certainly under the state system that we currently have, there's a cap, but it can be used year after year after year after year, and at some point, 10% is going to be 20%, and then 30% cumulative. And I'm just looking for some thoughts, and you just gave me some very good ones about how to handle that problem. So I appreciate that, and I encourage others to chime in.
Yeah, we are the most expensive rents in the country here.
Yep.
I'm sure that some of the other renters have a few more facts in their head that I'm sure they'll be able to share more clearly than I do.
You did a great job. Don't worry about it.
Well, thank you all.
Thanks, Julie. Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be Ann Clark, and after that, we'll hear from Betsy Ryan. And Ann, I'll ask you to unmute and start your video if you would like.
Unmute. Can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, we can. Hi.
Hey. Hi, my name is Ann Clark. I'm a resident of Larkspur Courts in Larkspur. I'm also a former property manager who has worked at many properties in Marin County and the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm also a tenant who has received massive rent increases, and my other fellow tenants have also expressed over years the massive rent increases. Thankfully, there is a 10% cap finally instated over the state of California, but we need to do more. The rent increase 10% is just way too much. And my question is, not my question, but I think we need to ask the questions from landlords. Landlords have fixed costs. Their mortgage payments, they've worked all their information into their what they need to pay. And the cost of yearly maintenance upkeep has also worked into loan payments. Rent increases in the past have been just for regular maintenance. And then they apply for loans for, changing the roof, other appliances like that, or other a bit major increases, upkeeps. But I would ask the landlord, why they need the 10% increase. What will that cover for them? Is that going to be maintenance only? What was it before you took over the property? What was the former landlord's yearly rent increases? And what did that enable that landlord then to do it? Now, why do you need the 10%? They're all going up to 10%. I just received the 10%. Two of my other neighbors have just received the 10% rent increase. Like you said, Kevin, that this is going to be year after year after year. What is that extra beyond the 3% previous rent increases? What is that going to go to? Now, you talked about Skylark. Skylark is doing a major renovation. What is the detail of those major renovations? And why do you need to move out people? We had a major renovation here at Larkspur Courts just about 3 years ago. Majority of us had stayed through that. Either they relocated to an empty apartment and then moved back if they wanted to, or just stay in that renovated apartment. They changed out all the windows. I'm not in a renovated apartment, but they changed out the windows, all the windows in one building. There's 10 buildings here, but in 2 days. They put plastic over it. You don't need that. What are they going to be changing out plumbing? No, they're going to just install new bathrooms. It's a tub. We hook up the plumbing there. The plumbing is all good. The sink, bathroom sink, the same with the kitchen. They changed out those two major areas and the rest was paint and replacing carpeting. Find out the details. Also, renters can't be responsible for not receiving any or limited amount of rent increases from the previous owners or landlords. It is not the renter's fault. Therefore, it should not be allowed to bank the previous years of not receiving rent increases or low ones or limited ones. This seems to be the one of the landlord's arguments, that residents receive too low or no rent increases, and they need to be brought up to market value. As a former property manager, do you know that this market value is done by market survey? They are reports from the property management staff that does weekly without fail. We call around to all the properties that are similar in quality, and we find out if they've what your rent is, what are you charging for your rent, 1, 2, 3 bedrooms? What is your security deposit? Have you changed that? Do you allow dogs? But the main thing is to find out, what are you charging for rent? Oh, we can match that. And it just keeps on increasing. That's why we do have high rents. I was here in 1991, and it was a game to get the highest rents charged. And I'm sorry to say, I was part of that. As a, you know, at that time, I was a leasing agent. We were just awarded, you know, little concession for getting the rents higher and higher each day. Yeah. But and they also asked during these market surveys, are you offering any concessions? That's reductions in rent for a month or two. And they also asked the occupancy rate at that time. So you need to find out from the landlords, these, you know, why do they need that 10% each year? And I'm sorry, I'm reading what I wrote. But by doing these market surveys and adjusting the rents, and with, you know, rent increases too, these landlords are acting as a, my husband said, a cartel. We need to stop these rents. They used to be 2 to 3% per year from regular maintenance upkeep. Now, if a new landlord said, oh, I want to upgrade this property, make it modernized, and that means, you know, renovating the inside of the apartments to new kitchen and new bathrooms and paint and carpeting, which they're going to do anyway with a turnover apartment. But the kitchen and the bathroom, the main thing, and the windows. You know, Woodlock, right next to Woodlock and Larkspur, right next to Skylark Apartments, they went through a major renovation, but they never changed the windows. They're windows from the about 70s. And yet they're still paying a high rent. And those are, what do you call them? One pane windows, you know, not 2 pane windows. You know what I'm talking, insulated, they're not insulated.
Yeah. So Anne, I just wanted to ask, I think a lot of your points are, I'm sort of reading between the lines, you know, what happened at, you know, at Woodlark and also Larkspur Courts was renovation without displacement. And I think what you're saying is, can renovation be done without displacement, which is sort of a just cause for evictions issues. Am I reading you correctly?
Yes.
Okay. And then I wanted to ask you too, a couple things just, you know, for the group and, you know, to further the discussion here, you know, and I think Councilman Harrop said the same thing, 10% year after year. Let me just play devil's advocate on 2 points. You know, one is, we know the Fed just increased the interest rates, you know, 3/4, and there's a good chance that, you know, we'll go into a recession. There's a good chance that inflation will be, you know, controlled and come down. So I don't think that we should assume that the increase is going to be 10% next year. As a matter of fact, if inflation goes back to what it was for the last decade or two, there'll be something between 2 and 5, and then the cap would be 5% by AB 1482, I believe. So I just wanted to check if that's something, you know, that we understand or agree on, because, the 10%, we're in, an unprecedented inflationary year. And I'm not suggesting that we don't continue looking for solutions here, but I just want to stick with the facts that it's not fixed at 10%. That's right now because inflation is rampant.
Well, the 10% is what the cap is. Landlords will go right to that cap. Like I just said, I received the 10%. Two of my other fellow tenants have just received the 10%. Find out from people if they've got less than 10%. No, landlords will go right to 10%. Pre-COVID, the highest rent increase I heard was about $1,100 per month. On average, it was about $700 per month. And that's pre-COVID. That's way, that was for several years. I would meet these people on my walks, my fellow neighbors, for dog walks, around our properties. Landlords will go right to the cap.
Correct. The only thing I'm just trying to clarify is the cap is set by inflation right now, and if inflation goes down, the cap will go down. So I'm not dismissing that landlords can and will, go to the max and even gouge, but I just want to be clear about AB 1482. The current state rent control.
Yeah. AB 1482 is set at the CPI. I'm sorry, it's set at 5%, and then the CPI. So I would switch it around and go set at the CPI, and ignore the other percentage, do what the, CPI is.
Okay. And yeah, you're right. I think it is the addition. You're right. And so maybe that's part of the, the question we've been asking of everybody: what would be acceptable? What do you think is livable given your experience as a property manager?
Well, as property manager, they had regular maintenance upkeep. The landlords that were, wanted to protect their assets did regular maintenance upkeep. There was no problem fulfilling maintenance work orders with, the 3% rent increases. And, they have a set rent that pays for their major loans, their mortgage, and the rent increases were for regular maintenance upkeep. And then when they needed, major things like, changing out the roof or doing a full renovation, meaning the kitchen and the bathroom, complete overhaul there, they worked it in. Or if they found that their foundation was, cracked with the latest, earthquake or something like that, then they apply for, loans. And you have to think of this as the regular, in the past, previous, 5 years, the rent increases for regular maintenance upkeep. Your landscapers, your maintenance staff, your property management company payment, those things. Find out from them now, the landlords now, what is your rent increases going towards?
Okay, yeah, that's a good suggestion.
Detail
So,
it.
Ann, thank you.
Oh.
I just realized we have 15 more people in the queue,
Oh,
and
sorry.
we do have. I kind of asked you a lot of questions, but thank you so much for your time. And
Thank you.
maybe for the next people, thanks. I'm going to just be a little more mindful of the time, so we make sure we get to everybody, because we need to. Thanks, Ann.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, if you can get the next person. And Alison, I don't know if you have a clock we can post, or if I just need to keep a track of time here, but I'm hoping we can limit it to the usual public comment time and make sure we get to everybody.
I don't have a clock available to show on screen tonight, but I think using a clock or a watch on hand would be good. Our next speaker is Betsy Ryan. After that, we'll have Michelle Vaughn.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Betsy.
Hi. So I've lived in Larkspur for 4 years, and I just got my third rent increase. So it's usually $100 a month, $1,200 a month. And I'm retired. My rent is higher than my pension. And I do work despite being retired, but it's insane. I can't afford to live here much longer. I certainly can't afford another rent increase. And I looked back at the reasons the last lady was talking about. Why are the landlords raising your rent? Well, I looked at all 3 letters and they basically said the same thing: fire insurance and utility increases and tax increases. And if, okay, you own a lot of apartments, you should be able to handle that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's an assumption I'm making, but you would think you would have enough income to cover those costs without dinging it or, upping the insurance every year. So I think it'd be great if the rental increase could be, 60% of the CPI or 5%, whichever is less. And I don't live in Skylark.
Okay, great. All right, Betsy, thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.
I'm calling on Michelle Vaughn next. And after that, we'll hear from Elaine Hausman.
Hi, thank you again for hosting this forum. I really appreciate it. And you've heard from me before. I'm a Larkspur resident. I've been here for more than 10 years. I'm a single mom. And we've had to move 4 times in the last 10 years because of continual rent increase. We were at Serenity and we went from $2,800 for a 2-bedroom apartment to $4,750. And then we moved and now I'm at Skylark. We went to 2 other places. And I work, I'm a faculty member at College of Marin part-time. And I have to have 2 other jobs just to make it to support my kids. And the reason I chose to stay here was because my ex-husband moved out of state. And I thought for the kids' emotional and mental stability, it was best to keep them here in Larkspur and keep some kind of stability. Otherwise, I would have probably moved out of state. We all know that this is not just a Marin County issue. It's a statewide issue. And there's a mass exodus going out of California. We pay a lot of taxes, the rent, everything is really expensive. And, it diminishes the quality of life and it diminishes the ability to be a stable parent when, someone like myself has to continually always be working and not being there for my kids. And, there's a reason that these corporations and investment banks are coming in and buying up these properties. It's not because they're losing money. The opportunity to make a tremendous profit is right there. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. And it's unfortunate that we're at the bad end of the stick, the renters. But I really appreciate all of you investigating this. And I hope that, we come to some kind of conclusion. And I agree that 60% of CPI and 5% is very reasonable. And from what I understand, from what I understand, if a landlord has to put some kind of major renovation in, that there is some place that they can go ahead and apply for some financial assistance. DSA has educated me on that. And that's all I have to say.
Great, thank you, Michelle. Kevin, did you have anything you wanted to ask or add, or?
No, that was helpful. I think we're hearing kind of a repeated theme here on what we might want to consider.
The last thing I will say, I am at Skylark and they raised our rent 10%.
Yeah, no, we know. Michelle, this is Kevin again. Maybe I could a quick question.
Sure.
We have a lot of renters in Larkspur, probably more renters in the city of this size than anywhere that I could think of. And that's important. That's an important part of our community. Another theme that I've kind of heard is, the corporate private equity, whatever they are, interests that are coming in and buying up properties, and then maximizing their profits as best they can through rental increases. But we also have a lot of renters who are not living in these larger properties. They may be living in an apartment that is some homeowner's place, that, you know, they've kind of put together an opportunity for rental so that they can supplement their own personal income, provide somebody with a place to live. So I guess my question is, do you see a reason to make a distinction in the kind of policy choices that we may consider between small landlords versus large landlords? Or do you think we should just treat them all on the same basis?
Well, originally, I thought that in one of the first two meetings that we had, that it should only be distinguished with the larger landlords. But then one of my brothers lives in Los Angeles, and he's told me about corporations coming in and buying up neighborhoods because they know that they can rent out these homes and, you know, charge a lot of money for it. I don't think that that's happened here yet, but that's definitely something that we should be on the lookout for. But I still, from my experience, I've been in the larger complexes, and that's where I've seen the most increase in rent. So I can only speak from my personal experience. And I don't know if there's a way to distinguish between large ones and small ones and how that would all work out. But from my experience, it appears that these corporations are coming in and buying up the really large properties and, raising the rents. And again, I agree with the other people who said, I don't bemoan anyone that to make money. I mean, that's what we live in a capitalist society, I mean, we all want to make money, but at what cost? At what cost to the community? At what cost to the small businesses? I wrote Kevin an email. You've all heard it before. There's lots of layers to this issue as a community. And somebody had mentioned it before. If nothing happens, we're going to end up with just elite people living in Larkspur, and I won't be part of that. So
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for that comment. Okay, Allison, who do we have next?
Next comment will come from Elaine Hausman. After that, I have Dorothy O'Leary. I don't see you on the list, so if you're here under a different name, please raise your hand. And following that, Duncan McCandless. And so here, Elaine Hausman is moved over.
Hi.
Hi, Elaine.
Hello, nice to see you, and such great things are being asked. Believe me, Councilman Haroff, I really am grappling with what you're talking about, and I'm thinking 2 to 3% every year, or 5% every other year. I'm thinking, how do you work? Your processes are fascinating me because you're looking under every rock, things that I haven't been thinking about. And even though I was trained to say 60% of CPI or whatever is less, or 5%, I do really respect the question you're asking that is in its own way more subtle than that. I want to add that I did go ahead and ask for paperwork for the housing fund at Skylark where I am. I thought, I'm going to give this a try, because not only do I think I qualify, because I did, but I also thought if I'm turned down, I want to know why. I want to see if there's a game here. And there wasn't a game. And my rent has gone down $338 a month. But I honestly believe it would never have happened if the council hadn't made it a place where we were talking about this, and that I believed Prime was shamed a bit publicly and went ahead and created a fund. And I qualified. Do I feel guilty? You bet. because if you walk this property, there's plenty of places to rent in Larkspur. If a minimum 50 apartments are empty, some are being renovated, some are not renovated yet, but there are ones that are renovated sitting empty. These are abandoned homes, and yet no one's bought them up yet. So it makes me wonder, if you're still pricing something too high, is anyone going to buy into that anymore? Because we've been gouged a lot. And the scary thing about the corporations taking over large neighborhoods like this is like, wow, that is serious impact. That isn't just dictating how much money is spent. That dictates the composition of a neighborhood. And we're talking about the elite, and we're talking about, do we get rid of black and brown? Is that what's going to happen with the people that just bought the property along the canal in San Rafael? Is gentrification another name for white rich? I'm not saying anything you haven't heard or thought about already. If you have a question for me, wonderful. If not, I'm happy to turn over the mic.
Yeah, thank you, Elaine. I just had one clarification. The Skylark Fund's $338 reduction, was that reducing from the rent before Prime bought the property?
Wonderful question. It was reduced from the increase.
Okay.
It was
So
reduced.
what's the net amount? Like they came in, they increased, and now it's back down 338. You net, lower or higher than before?
I'm afraid to say it out loud because I don't know how long it will last. I am paying less than before the increase with what my Pell rent had been before the pandemic.
Okay.
I'm
That's
guilty.
very helpful.
Yeah, but
No,
I will also help anybody who is a senior citizen who has the qualifications for this, because I knew I fit the profile.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Elaine, that's super helpful because, as you know, we've got, lots of different stakeholder inputs, and this meeting tonight is so vital. And, we're really, I've logged every comment, and I have the 35 comments from our first meeting, and I kind of cross correlate them, and I try to get pictures of, what people are saying. But, Prime approached us earlier and made that claim, and I have all the terms of the fund, and they even made the claim that some people's rents will go down. So at our last city council meeting, I think it was stated that about 7 people had reached assistance, and I'm going to ask for an update because you may be number 8 or you may be number 18, but
Right.
but the fact that that is in play to me is material. And and I just just to disclose a little bit, we're mostly here to listen, but I wanted to say 2 things. One is your comment about just gentrification, affordability. I think that is really something that not only Councilmember Harif, myself, but it's in our housing element. It's in the state RENA numbers. I mean, we do believe that affordability is part of not only social justice, but it's really part of what makes the community, including Larkspur. So, I mean, that's why I'm putting as much time as I am into this, and I think your concern and is very valid. The other thought here is I think we have to kind of segregate long-term and short-term. And the only reason I brought up, that inflation might be lower next year is just, I really want to address all the seniors who have spoken, Kate before, and you, Elaine, and others. To me, addressing the vulnerable first and foremost. And, some of these solutions may take a long time to work their way down from the federal and state level. So anyway, thanks. I just wanted to add a little bit, and, thanks so much for your comments. And Kevin, if you have anything else, I think I'm ready for the next speaker otherwise.
No, keep going. That's good. Thanks.
Thank you
Lee.
so much.
Great. Thank you, Kate. And Allison, could you just update us? How many people are in the queue right now?
We have an additional 11 speakers coming up. Our next speaker is going to be Dorothy O'Leary. After that, we'll have Duncan McCandless and Tristan Meyer after that.
Great. And just to, sorry, Dorothy, one more thing. So we've been at this for about an hour and 10 minutes, and we have till 8. So if you guys can sort of self-monitor. You know, we really want to hear all of you, but if there's something new, go ahead and amplify that. Otherwise, you know, we'd like to make sure we hear from everybody. So please. You're on mute, by the way.
Oh, okay, you're ready for me. Yeah, okay. Thank you so much for having this meeting. By the way, it's really heartening to know that you are taking this whole issue as seriously as you are. So I live at Skylark Apartments, and I really love my home. I really appreciate that what you just said, Mr. Paulson, that you want to address first and foremost, you know, the neediest people are in the most dire circumstances. I don't count myself amongst them, but I love my home and I love my neighbors, and I feel like we have a really like tight, sweet community. And I just think that you should be aware that like the kind of community that we have, that I have among my neighbors is, I think, the ideal that any community would want to cultivate. And the fact that, you know, skyrocketing rents, I mean, quite honestly, I can't tolerate another 10% increase next year. I just got a 10% increase that I'm now having to deal with. What you were saying about, you know, gentrification a moment ago, it's like, this is what that creates. I mean, not everybody who lives at Skylark Apartments can be a multimillionaire, can be, you know, necessarily working in the type of field that enables them to afford that kind of rent. And the people who do the ordinary jobs, people who clean houses, people who, you know, are self-employed, have small businesses, people who are policemen, firemen, you know, first aid people. That these people, like, more often than not, you know, live out in Tracy or something, and, you know, have to commute hours to provide services for people in places like Larkspur. So why doesn't our community embrace, you know, all of us? And like I said before, I do not want to be put out of my home. I do not want to be put out of the sweet community that we've cultivated. And I think that the leaders of Larkspur should want to cultivate the kind of spirit that we have already established before Prime came in. And I would hope that you would support Prime in wanting to maintain and support that. We really need to have our rents protected, and we need to have any cause for eviction, you know, protected for the renters as well. Those two things. I don't want to take up a lot of your time, but I know that you do hear from a lot of voices of people who are in dire straits, you know, and I just want to say it's not all about dire straits. You know, it's about preserving a really wonderful community, and that's something that you should want. So
Thank you, Dorothy. Dorothy, quick question. Are you open to meeting with Prime? You know, they're looking to set up a meeting with the tenants.
I am part of Skylark's Tenants Association, and I know that Skylark's Tenants Association presented a petition to Prime. And I would love to have Prime meet with our representatives. I myself, as an individual, I feel like, yeah, I could go in there and talk to them about what I just said to you, and they would just say, oh, that's so nice. We're so glad, you know, and things are just as they are. I have, in fact, written to Prime, I have written to our management office to complain about, you know, some of the things they did. I know when they first took over, you know, they wanted to rent the units that were open. And there was a lot of hoopla. Like, all of a sudden there were balloons and signs all over the place that said, you know, tours today. And I was like, okay, you know, they need to do what they need to do to promote their business. And, you know, I could, you know, bite the bullet and live with that. But it felt a little carnival-like, you know, compared to how it had been, very quiet and sedate place to live. And then all of a sudden there was a guy down at the intersection of Skylark Drive and Magnolia holding a sign in the shape of a big arrow that said Skylark Apartments doing this. And I all of a sudden I felt like I was living in a Subway sandwich shop. It just felt like so cheapening. And I wrote to them and I said, I really don't like it. Can we please just not have that? And they wrote back to me and they said, sorry that a sign, is so upsetting to you. If that's something you really don't like, you need to write to the higher ups at Prime. So they just dismissed me and sent me off to talk to somebody higher up the food chain, which me as an individual, going to the big corporate offices to say, I don't like the sign spinner at the end of our driveway. They don't care, so I just dropped it. So it kind of feels a little dismissive and like, why? Like what, if I go in there and I say to them, I think that you should like limit how much you're increasing our rents and consider, the community that we are, they're going to be like, it's so easy for them to dismiss one person,
Right,
so
right.
I don't want to
Okay.
be that person. I want my organization to have a voice at the table. And so far, as far as I know, and I might be wrong, I might be uninformed thus far, but last time I heard, they've been just like ghosting Skylark Tenants Association. They have not been addressing our petition.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. I didn't know there was a petition. I'll ask more about that later. Thank you so much, Dorothy.
Thank you.
Our next commenter will be Duncan McCandless, who's being asked to move over. After that, we'll have Tristan Meyer and Yoki. If they could raise their hands to come up next, that'd be great. Thank you.
Welcome, Duncan.
Yes, hello. You've heard from me before. I'm a little bit different on some of this. First of all, I'm thankful that the use of the term rent stabilization, because it feels more equitable to the whole, whoever the landlords are anywhere and whoever the tenants are. But I think it's really something that needs urgently to be employed across the board in Larkspur. And as opposed to what feels to me more aggressive and rigid rent control, that's too sharp. But stabilization seems a good label to work under. What I don't understand, I've been in Larkspur and at Skylark for 23 years. And it is my home. I am really settled there. And I don't have an alternative in a sense. And at my age, I don't want to have one. But if even with some of the proposed caps and things that you're mentioning, or that have been proposed, I think it's just too much. It seems outrageous to me. And I have perhaps a different sense of values because of my age, but even the rent that I pay, which everyone says is below market, I find extraordinary. I mean, it's a house mortgage, and how I wish I had thought of getting a house at some point if I could have ever have afforded one. And I have an idea that I could have in years past. It's just that things have changed so radically. And many of the people that are using language about the values, they're not the same as mine. I don't think $4,000 for a 2-bedroom apartment is reasonable in any way, shape, or form, period. And working on down the line. But for instance, if a property owner was faced with a tax raise every year along the lines of what the rent cap is in California, there wouldn't be any inhabitants in California. And at least I don't think there would be, there'd be a few. So I don't see why they can't follow something that is calm and modest, restricted, fair, et cetera, et cetera. And I would say, to me, I don't even want to think in terms of a yearly rent raise. Pell didn't have yearly rent raises. They had ones that were more or less acceptable over, I can't even remember what the intervals were. It wasn't so regular. I think, no more than 3%, period. And if property owners come in an aggressive way to snap up things for big profits for whomever, for themselves or for shareholders, they've got to look out for themselves and reconsider about what they're going to do, rather than think that just because we're sitting ducks in our apartments that they can raise rents to the full capacity of 10%. That seems just utterly outrageous, unacceptable, and unbelievable to me. And I don't want to get into a big deal on this, and I'm going to calm myself down. And thank you very much, because you've listened to me, I think, 2 or 3 times before, and maybe you'll hear from me again. But I do really appreciate this whole process, and I just hope it quickens with some resolution under the label of rent stabilization. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Duncan.
Our next speaker is going to be Tristan Meyer, and that'll be followed up by Nyoki, then Karen David.
Hi, everybody. How's it going?
Welcome back, Kristen.
I know. Good to see you guys again. I had a whole thing written for this, but honestly, most of that, it was just cribbed from the letter I submitted last week. So I would direct you to that because there's some good counter arguments to very common landlord claims about the impact of rent control. And I would actually just like to take my time to clear up a couple of questions that, because I've been keeping notes as people speak. Clear up a couple of questions, clarifications of things that have been mentioned. Rent burden came up. And we have recent numbers on that. 49% of Larkspur renters are rent burdened, which means they spend more than 30% of their income on rent. 25% of Larkspur renters are severely rent burdened, which means they spend more than, I think it's 40% or 50% of their income on rent. So, there is a pretty substantial amount of people who are already dealing with rent hardships before hitting a 10% increase. I want to clarify on the AB 1482, it's CPI plus 5% up to 10%. And so in terms of what a good local ordinance would look like, we're modeling 60% of CPI up to 5%. And we do a percentage of CPI because CPI already includes housing costs, so you don't want to double dip. And the 5% max is a buffer for high inflation years. So that still lets the landlords recoup some costs, but also doesn't nail residents with a 10% increase, which year over year actually works out to a lot. I worked out how much I would be paying right now if I got 10% yearly increases, and it's something like $5,500 instead of 2.5. So substantial. AB 1482 also makes a bunch of exceptions for smaller landlords already. Off the top of my head, it's single family homes not owned by a corporation, a duplex where the owner lives in the other unit. And there's one other, but there's already exemptions carved out for small landlords. And I think that most small Larkspur landlords would find themselves protected from that. Oh, on top of that, new construction is banned from any sort of rent increase controls for 15 years. So there's a couple of things going on there. The help from Prime, as this has been the tenant association line from the beginning, any help is great, but it's not permanent and it's not something you can count on. If you get a new job, if you get even a slight raise and go over the income limits, that's gone. So in school, I'm really happy that it's helping people who need help, but it's not permanent. It's not something that other Larkspur renters can rely on. And it doesn't actually stabilize rents. It just helps out a few people here and there. On that front too, Prime has still not, they haven't even responded with a no to requests to meet with the association. They just ghost us. They just ignore us. So that's your update on that. And then someone mentioned the Pell increases. They were $100 every 2 to 3 years. It works out to about 2 to 3%, which multiple people have mentioned is a sort of reasonable thing to expect. And that's what 60% of CPI up to 5% would try to approximate while accounting for, economical changes over the years. So it's still responsive. You don't have to change any rules. It's just a book indexed to CPI. So.
Thank you, Tristan. Yeah, and thanks for all your public comments have been helpful. I'm assuming the 49%, 25% figure is the community survey and the census. I've been slowly digging those numbers up. So, we know there's an issue. What I'm curious about is I do think we'll want to meet, and you're probably one of the representatives with Njoki. We do want to meet with Prime. As far as, their Skylark fund, I've been wondering, if those numbers are, movable, like there's a threshold, their cap could be raised. And also I thought there would be more permanence by, incorporating it into a lease. And, those were, statements I made when I first met with them. And I'm inviting you and the rest of the group just to think about that. That may not be, or, I don't know if that's something you've thought about.
It has. And honestly, like I said, while I appreciate it helps the people who need the help, I don't think it's any sort of solution. It doesn't help other Larkspur residents. It doesn't help. You have to requalify for it every 3 months. If it was in the lease, you'd have to requalify it with every year. Like it's like a short-term stopgap. Great, cool, whatever. I don't think it's a permanent solution, and we need something that will help Larkspur retain its amazing character that we all have grown to love and enjoy, and keep the life that we have, and that means a solution that works for all 6,000 Larkspur renters, and one that can't be if someone bought Skylark from Prime, there's no guarantee that they would continue that program either. So we need something independent of ownership, and that's where the government really needs to step in. That's where its power lies, that's where its role lies, and that's why it needs to be a local ordinance. The other thing I wanted to point out, and this is in my previous letter as well, but I want to say it and put it in Word. Rent control is actually shockingly cheap. Berkeley was able to stabilize 19,000 units for just $4 million. In contrast, to get housing vouchers for 2,000 units would cost $20 million. To rehabilitate 2,000 units would cost $220 million. The rent boards themselves are paid for by a $10 fee on each apartment that is paid by landlords, not renters. I admire that someone was willing to say, hey, I don't mind paying $10 a month for that protection, and I don't either, but that's a cost for landlords. And their rent boards are able to, they require less than one full-time position for every 1,000 units. So we'd be looking in Larkspur with maybe 3,000 units that qualify, 2 or 3 people. So cheap program, and far, far cheaper than any other affordable housing program.
Okay. Actually, Kevin, did you have any questions or thoughts?
No, I appreciate Tristan's comments. They're always well taken, and we've been looking at them.
Thank you. I appreciate your guys' action on this too. It's really heartening to hear all the support from you. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Our next commenter will be Njoki. And if Karen Davis and Lark Calderon Gomez could raise their hands, they'll be the next speakers following this. And Njoki, I'll just ask you to accept the panelists. Here we go.
I'm not sure what's going on here.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Hey,
Yes.
Jay, welcome back.
Hi, thank you, appreciate it. Sorry about that, technology. I really appreciate this forum. The ad hoc committee, Councilmember Paulson and Councilmember Haroff really appreciate this. I know it's been a great conversation. It's been a conversation that has a few months that has led us here, and we really appreciate the opportunity. I also really appreciate this, just the forum of us being able to really have a heart-to-heart and speak about some facts, because I think those are really important. I wanted to point out just something about I think there's been a couple of questions that were asked about what caps are we looking at, like what caps would be good. And Tristan said it, and I'll just reiterate it, as well as some of the other people here, is we're looking at what we're requesting and what we're suggesting is 60% of CPI or 5%, whichever one is less. And the reason we're requesting that is because it takes care kind of those the options that you were talking about, I think, Councilmember Paulson, of where, the rents are a lot one year and the other year they're not. So that's what that takes care of. So in crazy inflation years, such as this year, it would be 60% of CPI. And on the other years where it's, it's not so bad, then the 5% cap, which does not include inflation that like the current state minimums do, or other state rent control does, would actually take care of that. And the other thing that was brought up, and I think it's important to I think Councilmember Hara, if you brought this up, like how do we differentiate between large corporate landlords versus, small mom and pop. And I've had, as I've been tabling, I've had a really great opportunity of speaking with a lot of landlords, and they're actually small mom and pop landlords. And one of the things I've heard over and over again is, first of all, they would never raise their rents on their tenants at 10%. And second, they believe that when they keep their rents stabilized, and they're able to actually sustain and prolong the length of the tenants that live there. So I truly don't believe that rent control will affect the small mom and pop places. I do believe that in the event that, a small landlord decides to increase rents to the state maximum of 10%, then we should still have some rent stabilization caps in place to take care of, renters, whether they're in a small landlord, a small property or a large property, such as the one at Skylark. So I think we would like to urge you to think about solutions that are across the board for everybody, and not just Skylark. So the other thing that I wanted to point out, and Councilmember Paulson, I know you've mentioned this a few times, is you really would want to for us to meet with Prime. And I echo what Tristan said, is that we delivered the petition to Prime, and we're willing to share that with you in June of this year. In the petition, we laid out what problems we had, we laid out what hardships we were experiencing, we laid out what we wanted to do, and essentially all we were asking Prime to do is to sit with us on a table and negotiate in good faith. They have refused to sit with us. In fact, one of their lawyers, who's been at a couple of the meetings, just responded and said that they'll continue corresponding to us in the way that they have, and they usually do that through the portal. So we have tried. We did, before we came to the city council, we did try to speak with them. So at this point, the solution that they have given with the Skylark the Skylark Housing Fund, like Tristan said, is just a Band-Aid, right? It's almost like giving somebody that, first aid, somebody that actually needs a major operation because of a wound that you inflicted by hitting them in the head with a bat. And then you're just putting a Band-Aid over that wound is what they're doing. So we're willing to meet with them as an association, but I just wanted to be clear, and this is something that the association has agreed on, is that we are not wanting to meet with them regarding rent stabilization, because they're not able to provide that. The people that are able to provide that is you, the ad hoc committee. And so we're definitely wanting to just point that out. We want to meet with them, but not to discuss rent control, but to discuss all the other items that were on our petition. Hello?
Yeah. So I had a couple of questions. One is, Joki, could you forward the petition to the city clerk? I don't know, Allison, or but I don't think I've seen it before.
Say that again, Councilmember Paulson?
Yeah, if you could forward the petition to Allison, the city clerk, or just send it in so that we could have that for public comment, because I don't think I've seen it before.
Absolutely, we can do that.
Yeah. And then secondly, I mean, again, I'm going to, be honest with you. I think that, part of the question that we put out at the beginning was what the cap is. And I, am not sure that we're going to be able to do the, 5% or 60% of CPR, whichever is less. And I'm also concerned with the, fact that some of these solutions may take a longer time, getting everything stood up and so forth. So if there is a possible way to alleviate, the rent burden on the neediest people at Skylark, which, Elaine was one, and there are 7 others, I think you guys may not want to meet with the Skylark people, but I'm going to look for people who will want to meet with them, because I think this is something that needs to be explored.
So, Councilmember Paulson, I'm not saying we will not meet with them. We're certainly open to meeting with them.
About this specific, about the Skylark
Yeah.
Housing Fund.
Yeah, what we have
I-
found, what we have found is that, no worries. What we have found is that there's very few people that actually qualify for the fund. So the people that qualify for the fund are people that make, you have the numbers. It's
Yes.
a very small amount of people. And again, Skylark is a property of about 455 units. So imagine 7 out of those units. So it's a very small number, and it doesn't serve the greater population at Skylark. And again, I think as we're thinking at giving a solution that is will be beneficial to everybody and that will be acted on urgently, it's important for us to just know that those funds are only the housing fund is only available based on fund availability. It's not a never-ending pit that we can tap into. So that's kind of just what we wanted to express to you, because we wanted to just clear the record that we have tried meeting with them and we're willing to meet with them on other issues. But the rent stabilization, they're not able to enact an ordinance to actually help us with having permanent protections as renters.
Right. So let me repeat myself. I appreciate the limitations of what they've offered. What I'm asking you and the group is to meet with them on that specific issue to negotiate. And if you don't, I think that, I would look for people at Skylark who are willing to do that.
We hear what you're saying, and I'd like to bring it back to the Skylark Tenants Association. Again, we represent over 200 people at Skylark. So if we're going to meet with them, we will be meeting with them as an association, and we would like to approach this as an association and not as individuals, if you could honor that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we can talk about this more offline. I mean, I think that, the only thing that I'm pushing back on is that the discussion of the fund is off the table. I understand that you may have a high bar or it may not work for you in the end, and I won't try to force that outcome. But I do think that, that discussion could be very helpful. And I'd encourage you to think about that.
Okay.
Okay, Councilmember Harif, anything else?
No, that's fine.
Okay, great. And Njoki, thanks again, and thanks for all, for all the information. And you've been a part of public comment multiple times, and I definitely take to heart all the things you're saying.
Absolutely, no problem. And I'll go ahead and forward that petition to Allison and a couple of other documents just for the ad hoc committee to review and just to see the history on things, because I think it helps to see what the history is.
Okay, super. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Our next commenter is going to be Lark Calderon Gomez. After that, we'll have Alexis, then Philip Hallquist.
Hello.
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 Welcome.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thanks so much for being here, you guys, and doing this. I'm going to just keep it short and sweet. I just wanted to say I think 3 to 5% is fair, and I think it should be a permanent thing. I think there is obviously it's dire nationwide with the housing market as well. There's no options for anybody for homeowners or people who want to buy a home or renters. You know, we are stuck right now and we need your help. And if you can do something for us, because we're going to be pretty much homeless because it's every apartment is going up. I mean, there's no real solutions except to try and get some control over it. And 3 to 5 or 3 to 4, I think is doable. And it's always been about 3% anyway. And I think everybody kind of knows that, but 10% is insane. And it really needs, we need some help.
Great, thank you. Lark, I agree, 10% is insane. So,
Yeah.
all right, and, next comment.
Okay, our next commenter will be Alexis. After that, we have Philip Hallquist and Richard Quinones. And Alexis, I'll ask you to come over to the panelist side. There we go.
Welcome, Alexis.
Hi, nice to see you. Thank you for hearing what people have to say about this. I think it's important. So I wanted to start with the rent cap. Even if you were to take into account the average inflation in historically speaking of approximately 3%, we're talking in terms of the state law, 8% a year, which is still really high because of that 5%. And I think that the reason why traditionally rent control rent caps are less than CPI is to account for the fact that landlords then do not have to recruit new tenants. They don't need to turn around the unit. All of these things decrease their costs. And so it's not like they're going to be losing money by going less than CPI. If it keeps the tenant population more stable for them. And I wanted to say regarding a company like Prime, and Prime is what's happening now in terms of the private equity investors. This isn't about a landlord surviving. This is about making a steep return for investors. Along the lines, what I've heard is typically 20% per year. So coming in and actually exploiting the tenants and then bailing out with a large return on that investment. And when I say exploiting tenants, I mean more than financially. I mean that the exploitation in this case is about our health. I think it's a public health risk what's going on here, and even about our lives, because I think that the health problems that are happening here are life-threatening. So what I'm talking about is asbestos. And Prime has broken state and federal laws regarding that. And I believe that this is in the name of profit. They have not been able to provide a survey that they are required by federal law to do for any renovation on a property like this. They did not do testing. They did not have any precautions in place for 6 months of renovations, which totaled approximately 100 units from starting the renovation through finish. So they're in some kind of various stages of completion right now. But that's a lot of unregulated asbestos release. And there's been a lot of deceit around that. So they're kind of, regulators are trying to get the information from them and they aren't being forthcoming and they aren't providing it. So, and at the same time, they're telling tenants and regulators that that they had a certified industrial hygienist come in, do the testing, found no lead or asbestos, and that they're following health and safety regulations, which is not the case because health and safety regulations is the hazmat procedures. I even had the general manager tell me, I think it was last week, that they did do the testing prior to any renovations. And of course they found asbestos. Now this is a new story. Of course they found asbestos because as we can see, there's hazmat on site taking care of it. So I said, well, what about the 6 months, 5 months, 6 months of renovation that happened prior to them being on site? He said, we were following regulations. I said, but nobody saw any hazmat. He
Yeah.
said, just because you
Alexis,
didn't see it didn't mean it was happening. Right.
Alexis, so you and I
So-
have spoken offline. I appreciate that. Alexis, can you remind me, have you submitted all this as public comment? Because I know you and I exchanged emails. Did you send this into the city attorney, like some of these different,
No,
you know,
no.
could you possibly do that? I'd really encourage you to. I
Okay.
think that would be helpful because then it's public record. And
Yeah.
also, I just want to move on. We only have 12 minutes or so left.
All
and
right. So
I think what you're saying
so-
is really important, but also think it should be, I've had a good conversation with you. I think it would
Okay.
be helpful to have that sent in.
Okay, yeah. So anyway, sorry for going on too long about that, but it's simply the fact that there's the exploitation going on. It's not about them just surviving. So I definitely think we need a local rent board, as you and I have communicated about, because it's an undue burden on tenants to be carrying the burden of enforcing the law themselves. And I think that there should be a higher buyout rate for no-fault evictions to prevent Prime or any other landlord from improperly manipulating the laws around that. Make it a higher burden, bigger problem for them in order to get rid of somebody under remodeling or there's one other thing regarding that, but any kind of no-fault eviction. So, and I agree with the housing fund information. The problem is it can be terminated anytime. As Jokey said, it's subject to fund availability. I don't think it should be incorporated into the lease because once you sign a new lease, now you're subject to all new terms under Prime's lease. And those terms are not favorable for tenants. It's much better for tenants to remain month to month on their old lease. And I think that any agreement that would happen between tenants and Prime, there would need to be a contract to memorialize it, because what we have seen is that there tends to be statements made, and they tend a lot of times to be inaccurate and to not follow through. So I think that any agreement they would come to, I think there needs to be a contract on that. And that's it. So thank you.
Okay, Alexis, again, please submit your stuff. And thanks so much for all the comment and for this too.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Allison, how many people do we have left in the queue? Because I'm looking at the time. We have about 10 minutes left.
We have 5 additional commenters left in the queue.
Okay, so I'm going to ask if we can reduce the time a little bit. I've been trying to just give people their space, but I really want to hear from all 5 in 10 minutes. I will start giving warnings. So Richard, go ahead. Please try to limit your comments to about 1.5 minutes.
And following Richard, we'll hear from Jacqueline Harris, then Leslie White.
Great, thank you. Richard, you're muted, so if you can unmute, please.
And Richard, I'll ask you to unmute on my end.
Okay, there we go.
Okay,
Hey,
good.
Richard, how you doing?
great. I just wanted to comment on Elaine's commentary about the fund. My understanding of the fund is that the way it actually works, the rent does not get reduced. The rent stays at the recent rent hike, and then the tenant gets help paying that new rent. It's not as if the rent on that apartment goes down by the amount that the tenant gets from the fund. Thereby, if that tenant stays another year and qualifies for the fund again, that qualification would have to be on a rent increase on that rent that is in place right now. And then if that tenant were to move, and it was the case that we're talking about a fund that's helping to pay a current rent, which is the official rent, once that tenant moves, that rent goes right back up as if that tenant had never been getting that assistance. And whoever that new tenant would be, of course, they'd probably then sign on to the new lease, and it would go right back to what the rent was or would have been had that tenant not been getting that help. So my understanding might be completely different and wrong, but that was my understanding on how this fund works. It's not a rent decrease, it's the current rent with the increase getting help to pay that, so that then the next increase will be based on that current rent. Now, maybe somebody could explain it to me.
Yeah, Richard, so that actually raising a really good point. And in the interest of time, we will be looking into it a little bit more. So I just want to add one point that, anywhere in this controlled city like Berkeley or not, the moment you move out, rent is then market rent. It's vacancy decontrolled. So that's irrespective of the Skylark. You did raise some good points, and if you don't mind, we'll pursue them later so I can move to the next caller.
Could I just ask you one question that I became confused about from you? When you were talking about the fund and then being honest about what you might or might not be able to do in terms of percentages of rent stabilization, it almost sounded as if you were considering the fund as an alternative to rent stabilization. I might have heard that completely wrong, but I felt a little confused about what you meant by that.
Yeah, I'll clarify very briefly because we don't have a lot of time. I think for me, all cards are on the table. We may do a rent stabilization. We may do something else. I feel as part of the process, it makes me uncomfortable that that cannot be discussed at all. If people are not willing to discuss it, I'm not asking anybody to accept it. That to me means we haven't really, done our due diligence and looked at all the options. I know there's a different history for the tenants there, and I'm going to read the petition, and I want to understand better. But I'd really like to see both parties meet and have discussion. If it doesn't work, that's one thing. But to take it off the table is a bit challenging. So it's not that I have a direction I want to go in, but I certainly would like to go that avenue because I think there's some misunderstanding. And you're raising some really good points I'd like to provide for myself.
And I think it should be discussed. I think it should be discussed. But I want to say,
I hope so.
I don't think we want to do it like an employer saying, oh, we're willing to meet with the employees individually, one-on-one. Well, there's a reason for unions in the sense that when the larger entity meets with individuals, it's a different dynamic than when you have more of an equal footing on each side. So that was it. I'm sorry I dragged on.
No, that's okay. We wouldn't want one person to meet. We would like to make sure that all voices are heard, between the tenants and the ownership at Skylark. So thank you so much. And then if we can go to the next person, so we don't run out of time.
Agreed.
Our next speaker is going to be Jacqueline Harris. Following that will be Leslie White and Scott Jones, if they could raise their hands to get ready to be promoted next.
Okay, great. Welcome. It looks like Jacqueline.
How's that? Can you hear me?
Hi, Jacqueline. How are you?
Hi.
Yes, we can.
I'll try to make my comments brief. I basically am hoping that at 74 years old, I signed I thought, a rather expensive lease agreement 3 years ago, and now it went up 10%. I'm not at Skylark, I'm at Woodlark, and I know they've done some great renovations, but a 10% every year would drive me out of here. I have fixed income, obviously, at 74. I feel like there should be an elderly category so that if you come in at high rent, then you can expect, I don't know, a 10-year rent, contract? Why is it a month to month? Why is it a 1-year option only? What I've rented in the past and you get options of 5-year rent. And this is just not even offered. And also the management has told me several times that they would much rather have stability where renters stay. As everyone's been saying, it builds community. It's much easier for the manager not to be searching for renters. And in fact, she told me that they've had a lot of people leave because of the 10%, which is a headache for her. And so I just feel like we need to look at this from the perspective of fixed income residents who have to rent because it's not a good time in our lives to be buying houses. And so that's my main comment that I'd like to leave for tonight.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jacqueline.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're at 7:53. We really only have a few more minutes. Ellison, how many more people?
We have 2 more on the list, Leslie White, and following that will be Scott Jones and Leslie.
Okay, so yeah, Leslie, please.
I see she's coming over from the panel or from the attendee side, and hopefully we'll be here soon. I'll ask Scott Jones to move over as well in case we lost Leslie in that transition, so we can hear from him first if needed.
Looks like we have Scott. Welcome, Scott. You're on mute. If you can unmute.
I will try to make it brief.
Thanks.
Basically, I just wanted to first give just a sense. I do live at Skylark. I'm 61. I have a good job. I've grown up in Marin. I've lived in Marin 44 of those 61 years. Currently, I am paying 45% of my take-home pay just for rent. I just wanted to point out a couple things that renters don't enjoy building equity. We don't enjoy tax breaks for ownership, whereas prime or any of the landlords, especially the larger ones, any of the empty apartments, I'm sure they're getting a tax write-off for that. They probably are getting a tax write-off for the subsidy that they're giving out. They're enjoying a lot of different benefits that the renters have none of that. All we have is a home that we like living there. We like participating in Larkspur as viable citizens that shop at all the stores, go to the restaurants, but that's not going to last. I got 10% raise. I could probably withstand one more 10% raise, and that's not bragging. That's just, if I figure out how to do it, I could do it. But realistically, I think I'm fairly typical type of renter here. It's going to be forced out. So I just wanted to sort of put that in as perspective.
Great, Scott. Thank you so much. And I want to thank you on behalf of, I've really been learning a lot of people are self-evicting, they just have to leave and they never get to make this meeting. So we're, aware of that. And I appreciate your comments there. So I think we have one more, and Councilmember Haroff, I know has a hard stop here. So if we can get the next speaker, I think Leslie White for maybe 1 minute, and then I think we need to wrap everything up.
Hey, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Leslie. Welcome.
Okay, thank you so much. Because I've been following this and really interested in it, and I've been participating in it. And I just want to say that I do support this 60% of the CPI or the 5% cap, whichever is less. I appreciate all of your efforts on our part and for your taking the time to listen to us and engage with us. And it's very important. Yes, I've been living in Skylark for 28 years, all right? 28 years. And I'm gonna try to turn on video. I don't know if it matters even.
Leslie, just one thing, we really only have about 1 minute, so it's
Okay.
fine if you just want to make a
Okay.
brief comment.
Okay, well, I ran into Mr. Haroff on a recent weekend when I was walking up and down the stairs, the street during a Saturday event, and I had the pleasure of meeting him in person. And I was able to thank him for all the work that you guys have been doing. And we have been active in trying to engage our other Larkspur neighbors and we've been getting petitions signed from not only Larkspur, but from Mill Valley, from San Rafael, from Sausalito. It seems that everyone in Marin wants this rent stabilization to happen. So we're starting out in Larkspur, but we want to branch out. And this is what I think we're trying to do. And we hope that with your help, we can do this. Starting in Larkspur, because that's our home and we really don't want to leave here. I've been here since '94 at Larkspur, at Skylark, and we're here for a reason because it's been such a wonderful place to live. Please don't make us be priced out. This is just our humble request. Do what you can to cap our rents at 60% of CPI or 5% rent cap, whichever is less. And I will edit that.
Okay, thank you so much. And again, I'm sorry if I'm cutting people off, but we have 1 minute. So I wanted to turn it back to again, first and foremost, I want to thank, I've written down, I think 20 to 25 comments, all the notes here from all of you, and, bringing the rest of the council in is a critical step here. And, I appreciate those of you who, felt me push back a little bit. I want you to know this is a negotiation with a larger community and many stakeholders. So I want to see that we get a solution, but one that works for as many people as possible. With that, Councilmember Haroff, did you have any closing thoughts?
No, although I'm having computer problems. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I think
Okay,
we all.
good. Okay, good. My video keeps going out and then my mic goes out. I just wanted, because I got to go, and I'll take the opportunity here at the end, really just to thank everybody for participating tonight. This is a learning process for us in the city, as well as in our larger community. We want to hear from everybody. But I do want to just clarify one thing that one of the speakers brought up a few minutes ago. And Gabe has been good about emphasizing that everything is on the table, and it is. But I will say that I am personally concerned about relying too much on negotiated solutions with landlords. I think I have pretty much gone on record that I believe it's important for us to adopt an ordinance of broad applicability that would go beyond any negotiated agreement that might be entered into between renters and landlords. Wouldn't necessarily supplant that. If people want to agree to something different, that's fine. But I just want people to know that from my own point of view, we're looking at an ordinance, or at least I am. And I hope we can get that. I encourage everyone to keep talking with each other. Negotiated solutions are always good, but at some point, they have limitations. So again, thank you all for participating tonight. It's been a great discussion, and one that I fully expect we will continue.
Great, thank you, Kevin. And just in closing, as the city manager said, the next steps here, we were going to meet with the landlords to have a similar forum next Tuesday, and that's been postponed, I think, for maybe 2 weeks from today. We do have a city council meeting coming up the first week of October. And, we just did a report out on this last city council meeting. I think we're going to actually expand this. And, part of my, role as playing devil's advocate is to try to really anticipate and to bring in all the other council member points of view so we can build a consensus. So I do look forward to that. And as with all of you, many I've talked to you offline, some of you I may still reach out to. Please, do feel free to contact me. I generally respond the same day. And as Councilmember Harrow said, I'm really deeply appreciative because I know this is a head and a heart issue. I mean, there's a lot here to think about and analyze, and finances and law, but these are your homes. That's why we're here. We're all members. I was a renter for almost my whole life, so I understand. I lived under rent control for at least 15 years in Berkeley. So I appreciate the thoughts. I'm putting a lot of time and thought into this, and to be continued. So to all of you out there, have a great night, and thanks again. And we will continue this conversation.
Yes, thank you all.